Hey everybody, and welcome to another Flipping Pages. Now today we're going to flip through a rule book which I had an eye on for quite a while. This is Blucher by Sam Mustafa. I first saw the play of this video on a YouTube channel. I can't remember which one, but it was so intriguing. I knew I had to get my hands on it. I got the PDF version, and when I finally managed to get this version, which is the hardcover version, I just could not wait to share this with you. Now, there are other videos that have actually done an in-depth look at the rules. I'm just going to do a flip through of the book and, just have a look inside and maybe my thoughts on the game very, very quick. The edition that you have here is the hardcover. It's sold out everywhere. You can still buy the PDF from Honor website, and that's the website that I think is supporting this game. So yeah, the game is still available. Now there are a couple of mechanics in this game which I thought was very, very interesting, and as you know, I really like cool mechanics in games, and Blucher seems to have scratched that itch. Now, one of the reasons why I went with Blucher is simply because for me, when I first got into Napoleonics, I got to play Napoleon's Battles by Avalon Hill. And that got me into, huge brigade level, corps level games, really huge games. And ever since then, I've always had the itch of playing games like that. The only problem was playing Napoleonic battles back in the day took almost all night. They would do all-nighters, and although it was satisfying, it's just way too long. My gaming group at the time did at least like 20 games over the course of the time we were playing Napoleon's battles. And let me just say, while it was satisfying, it was just long. Now, when I saw Blucher, I was wondering whether Blucher would fix that. And there's only one way to find out. Now, I know this already, it actually does. But to play this game, it actually shortens that large battlefield in a shorter time, right? So let's see what's inside. All right, so let's have a look inside the book. First off, we've got Blucher doing the forward to the book. And then we have acknowledgements, which I really appreciate the fact that they acknowledged, or Sam acknowledges all of the playtesters that were responsible for making sure that rules are tight. Then we got a table of contents, then introduction. There are two ways to play this game. You can actually play this basic or advanced. So basic is basically using the cards and stuff like that. Advanced is you can actually play larger games, miniatures, terrains, and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool that they did that way, because it basically means that if you don't have any miniatures, you can already start playing the game and getting to know how the game works, right? Which I think is a good way to do this. Then there's a summary of gameplay, basic mechanics, and the mechanic I thought here, which was very interesting, is the momentum. I thought momentum was very interesting, and I also thought exhaustion, which it's been done in other rule sets, but I like the fact that they added it here as well. And also, the game works on a game daylight time, which when the game ends when it's nightfall, which is very, very cool. So you got all the equipment you need, and then some miniatures, pictures, which is kind of very nice. And then you got dice that we're going to use to play. The base width for this game is 3 inches or 75 millimeters. And 1 BW, or the measurement in the game, basically means that. You got the cards, and the cards have two states. They have the face down state and the face up. So face down means it's concealed, and face up means it's revealed. So when you're on the tabletop and you see the army approaching, they'll probably all be face down until you manage to reveal them, right? So what do each unit represent? One unit in Blucher is 2,000, 3,000 men, which is basically 4 to 6 battalions. 1,000 to 2,000 men in terms of cavalry, it's 6 to 12 squadrons, 18 to 24 guns. And then here we break down the card, right? The different bits in the card, movement, where the center point of the card is, the unit name, traits, and stuff like that. It also works with keywords when it comes to traits, which really helps. It's the new way to make sure you don't have like pages and pages of rules, and streamline everything. And you got all these icons, which actually also help streamline it. The thing about Blucher is everything is more streamlined, it's faster, which basically means the problems I had when I was playing, where large games would take all night, I think will be reduced when it comes to Blucher. And also Blucher works with objectives, which I really appreciate. Objectives are very, very important, and I wish more games would work with objectives. I know these days the modern game designer is incorporating this to more designs, but it should actually be a standard, objectives. Then we have basics of play, morale and stuff like that. All of these are basically bits of rules, which I'm not going to teach you how to do it. I'm not even going to review it. We're just going to have a look at the book itself, right? How it looks like. And as you can see, there are a lot of like different examples. So if you are new to the hobby, you'd be able to learn relatively quick all examples of the different instances in the game. And I like the fact that they are very meticulous with all of this, because sometimes, and when I was doing the Napoleon's battles rules, it was quite tedious. But that's old school. New school is stuff like this. Nice pictures. You break the phases down. The book is slightly thicker, of course, but there are lots of examples to lead you, to complete the game with the least amount of hassle. Going through all of the phases with a lot of very good examples and very nicely presented, which I really, really appreciate. For a lot of guys who are in the store, who are basically new, it's things like this, very subtle things, which I think helps, a person decide to try the game out, So yeah, and then we have advanced game. All right, so the advanced game, this is where you play with miniatures. You got more advanced rules. There's army building, and then there's this thing called Skarnhorst. I hope I pronounced that right. And it's basically campaigning, right? Which I think is another great thing about this rule set. Anyways, playing with miniatures, and as you can see, it tells you what the standards are. Shows you some miniatures, tells you what the miniatures are, which is also a very, very nice thing to do. When you are featuring miniatures, you want to tell folks, a little bit about the miniatures. And then the cards are a bit different, of course. It does not look as pretty because each of the cards have this little thing at the back. But by doing it this way, you pretty much have all the information on the table. And then you got the advanced rules, and all the advanced rules include things like reinforcements. I think the weather is in here somewhere and stuff like that. And then you got entrenchments, multiplayer stuff, mixed brigades, especially if you're doing the peninsula at some point, it'll be mixed brigades. And then you got artillery, and then you got overstrength, understrength, forces, basically all the stuff that to add on the extra meat to the bone, which is the basic rules, right? And then you got army building, how to build your army, and how to read army lists over there. And then you got all that, allies, artillery, and such. And then they break down the different nations. You got Austria with Archduke Charles, and then the British with, of course, Wellington. And then you've got one version of Napoleon right there. And then you have another version of Napoleon. And then you have representing the Ottomans, Muhammad Ali and Ali of Janina. And then you have Blucher, of course, Blucher. And then Kutuzov. Basically, who is who, at the time. Now the army building bit, I think if once you've mastered the basic game, the army building would be where you want to go to next. I'm glad they covered this as well. But this part, Skarnhorst, which I think is really, really interesting. Now they teach you how to make this map, and how to maneuver off map. So when you get on map, right, where you deploy, and I think this captures the spirit of the namesake, right, Blucher, right, and where he came in at Waterloo. You know, if you were to think about it, right, where you come in and where you're deployed totally changes the game altogether. And this is basically a whole campaign, how to do this, and how to work with the recommended rules and stuff like that, which is really, 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 really excellent. This if the advanced rules were the extra meat, this is everything: the sides, the sizzle. And then you've got the historical scenarios, and there's the philosophy of scenario design, how to design a scenario and stuff like that, you know, which is kind of cool. Gives you guides and stuff like that. And you got appendices, FAQs and stuff like this, charts, you know, and then as always the very important indexes. Now I'm going to go through elements of the book that I thought were really, really fantastic. What fantastic things I liked about the rules. But you know, as you can see, it's a really nice, pretty looking rule book. It does have that. It does give this feel of old school, you know, serious wargaming. I mean, somebody picking this book up knows this is not some grim, dark dice chucker game, right? It's got all the subtleties, and as you can see from the rules, there's a whole lot of thought that's going into the game, right? It's a whole meal, you know, here, not just a quick happy meal, if I may. So yeah, so that's pretty much my casual flip through. The next part is my thoughts on this game and my experience with something similar. So yeah, stick around for that. All right, so that's what the book looks like. Now let's see what it feels like, right? So Blucher is designed to represent warfare at the level of army command, right? Instead of commanding individual battalions, players control brigades, divisions, making decisions more like a historical army commander would. A single unit in the game usually represents an entire brigade, right? Meaning several thousand soldiers on the battlefield. Now, one interesting thing about this design choice is that it deliberately moves the player away from detailed tactical control. You're not worrying about battalion formations, skirmish screens, or individual firing lines. Instead, the game assumes that those things are happening inside the brigade itself. What the player is really managing is when and where to commit these formations across the battlefield. Now, because of this scale, the game allows players to recreate very large battles of the Napoleonic Wars without needing massive numbers of miniatures or an almost table. Battles that historically involve tens of thousands of troops can be played in a relatively reasonable amount of time, often in just a few hours. The rulebook itself contains core rules, additional systems that expand the game. Early sections, as you saw, introduces the basic mechanics and stuff like that, while the later chapters, advance rules. But one thing that becomes clear when you're flipping through the rulebook is that it's written with accessibility in mind. The rules are not overly dense, and there are plenty of examples and diagrams. Compared to many older historical rulebooks, it feels much more approachable for newer players. One particularly interesting feature included in the book was, as you saw, the Skarnhorst, which allows players to maneuver their forces before the battle begins to determine how the tabletop engagement develops. Now, one of the most distinctive mechanics in Blucher is the momentum system. To understand how the game flows, it helps to look a little more closely at how momentum actually works. Now, instead of traditional alternating turn sequences used in many tabletop games, Blucher uses a shared pool of momentum that represents the initiative and energy of the commanding generals. Now, during a turn, a player spends momentum to activate formations, move units, launch attacks. As long as the commander still has momentum available, they can continue issuing orders and pushing their army forward. However, each action carries a degree of uncertainty. At certain points, the player must roll to see whether the momentum continues or whether the command fails. Now, this is done, quite elegantly. At the end of one player's turn, he rolls the amount of momentum on 3d6 for the next player, right? And every time the player does his movement, whether he's moving his force or you're using a unit, he double checks with the player who rolled for him, because these dice are hidden, right? And what this creates is a tabletop sense of operational tempo, right? A bold commander might try to push multiple formations forward in a single surge of activity. He's hoping to overwhelm the enemy before losing momentum. But the more aggressive you push the army, the greater risk that your turn will suddenly end, and you're caught wrong-footed, and your opponent will seize the initiative. In practice, this mechanic produces a battlefield that feels fluid and unpredictable, which is cool. Sometimes a commander can sustain a long chain of actions and dive deep into enemy lines, while at other times a plan may stall only after a few moves. The system is designed to simulate the friction and uncertainty that real Napoleonic commanders face when trying to coordinate large formations across battlefield. And I like the fact that Blucher points to this as one of the main mechanics in the game. Another important concept is army exhaustion. As units will take losses and become disrupted. The army gets more exhausted. Once it reaches a certain threshold, the army collapses and the battle ends. This system reflects the historical reality that armies rarely fought to the last man. Instead, they eventually reached a breakpoint where cohesion just fails. From a gameplay perspective, this mechanic also keeps battles from dragging on too long. Once exhaustion starts to build, the end of the battle can approach, quite quickly. The rulebook also supports the use of cards, which is a simple way to solve a lot of problems. The cards allow the game to incorporate elements like fog of war, which is very, very important when it comes to battles, right? Now, an interesting thing I want to do is I want to compare Blücher and Napoleon's battles from Avalon Hill. Now, I make this comparison simply because, my very first Napoleonic game was at 15mm using Napoleon's battles rules. I must have had 20 plus all-nighter games with these rules. So when I saw Blücher, I could not help but to compare. See, both systems operate at roughly the same scale. In each game, a unit generally represents a brigade, meaning players are commanding formations that historically contain thousands of soldiers. Now, because of this, both games are capable of portraying very large Napoleonic engagements on the tabletop. However, both of these rule sets come from very different eras of game design. So Napoleon's battles reflects a time when historical war games often tried to model as many battlefield details as possible. Players tracked formations, morale effects, and a long sequence of phases in the game for each turn. Now, Blucher, on the other hand, represents a more newer philosophy where designers often try to capture the experience of command rather than the procedural detail of the battlefield. Napoleon's Battles was published in the late 1980s, reflects the classic style of historical wargaming from that period. The rules use a traditional turn structure in which players move through a sequence of phases, movement, firing, close combat, morale, stuff like that. The system places a strong emphasis on detailed battlefield procedures and tends to involve more bookkeeping and step-by-step resolution. Now, Blucher, by contrast, represents a more modern design philosophy. Instead of focusing on detailed tactical procedure, the game emphasizes command decisions, and battlefield momentum. The mechanics are streamlined, which is great. So that the sort of focus stays on the operational flow of the battle, rather than managing the numerous modifiers and stuff like that. Another difference lies in how the two systems handle command and control. In Napoleon's battles, command is usually represented through command ranges, right? Command checks, and that restricts how it operates in the battlefield. So when you're playing with the Austrians, everybody seems to like pile in together, and you can see them moving. I remember Wargames magazine calling them oodles of Austrians, tight packed, formations, while French formations with their larger command, right, were a bit more spread out, right, showing the experience of the commanders. Now in Blucher, command is represented more in a more abstract way, through the momentum system, which determines how long a commander can continue issuing effective orders. Now, right, so both systems attempt to capture the drama of large Napoleonic battles, but they do so in different ways. Napoleon's battles leans towards detailed simulation, while Blücher aims to recreate the feel of commanding an army through faster and more streamlined mechanics. So, in many ways, Blücher can be seen as a modern evolution of the same idea, a grand tactical Napoleonic game that allows players to fight the great battles of the era without, getting bogged down in excessive complexity. Another practical difference between both systems is the number of miniatures required. Oh, I remember games with Napoleon's battles. The table was filled. Traditional games like Napoleon's battles encourage large collections of figures. A Blucher, because of its brigade scale, allows players to represent much larger forces with fewer models. This makes it particularly appealing to players, who are new or who want to use smaller scales like 6mm or 10mm miniatures. Now that said, whether the player prefers Blucher or a system like Napoleon's battles, it all comes down to personal taste, to be honest. Some players enjoy the detail and procedural structure of older rules, while others prefer the faster, more streamlined approach found in modern designs. Yeah. Overall, the rulebook represents a system designed to handle large engagements, while keeping the focus on command decision and battlefield momentum. For players interested in recreating big Napoleonic battles, whether Waterloo, Borodino, or Leipzig, Blucher offers a rule set that tries to, capture the scale and drama of those conflicts in relatively accessible format. I've used Napoleonic battles as a base to understand and appreciate Blucher. I think Napoleon's battles walked so that Blucher can run. However, if you enjoy brigade level Napoleonic games, can I recommend Age of Eagles by Scott Bowden, Grand Army also by Sam Mustafa, and General d'Army by Dave Brown. I hope you enjoyed this different way of doing a flip through. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Leave a comment. I would really like to know if this works for you. Or should I just leave this for a little bit more meatier rule books, for us to discuss and stuff like that. But comments are very, very welcome. But so are likes and subscribes. Don't forget to do that as well. And as always, don't forget to enjoy painting those figures.